GlobeOne is creating a global solution to help solve the problems of financial exclusion and inequality. Sunil Sachdev is Chief Business Development Officer for GlobeOne. In his role, he is responsible for cultivating new markets, shaping product strategy, and strengthening their global network of member banks, corporate members, and strategic alliances. He'll be in conversation with Manuel, Chinea, Chief Operation Officer at Popular Community Bank. Most of Manuel's previous experience was in functional disciplines of product management, cash management, and small business lending, including oversight of the bank's government-guaranteed loan programs. For over 2 decades, Manuel has been an active member and officer of several marketing, credit, treasury management, and non-for-profit organizations. So let's please welcome them to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning. So just out of curiosity, Manuel and I, for us, this is our first SIS. For how many others in the audience, just a show of hands, is this your first SIS?
We're in good company.
Yeah, that's great. I was listening to Greg right before the break, and as he talked about priorities and disciplines, and how it's just a singular priority and you should concentrate on the essentials. It's hard to do when you work for a global startup that's looking to address a problem like financial empowerment around the world and financial exclusion and mobility. You tend to rationalize more than you'd want. And yesterday was one of those, I thought one of those moments for me where in one of the breakout sessions, I got a picture from my wife showing that my 6-year-old just got her yellow belt. And it was just awesome. And it was one of those moments where you sit there and think that, oh my God, I can't believe I missed that. And you start trying to figure out, should I have been there for that? Or, what I'm doing right now, is that really that important? And I have to tell you that for the first time in a long while, when I got that picture, I realized being around people like you in the audience here and listening to some of the conversations last night and the presentations yesterday, I could tell you that that rationalization wasn't very hard. And it's amazing to just be around the energy in this room and to just listen to all the problems we're trying to tackle as a community, as Mel talked about, and how we're hopefully going to make an impact through collaboration. And that's what we hope at GlobeOne to do. And I was proud to just respond back to my wife that we're making the world a better place for my 6-year-old. And I truly do believe that. So thank you. Thanks, Steve. So Manuel, before we play a short video on financial exclusion and how we're trying to define and address the problem, can you just share a little bit about Popular Community Bank and a little bit more about what you're doing in the space?
Sure. And it's, I know I've been here for the past day and a half, and a number of you have come up and asked me when they see my name tag, what exactly is Popular Community Bank? So Popular Community Bank is a community bank that is based in New York with operations in New York, New Jersey, and Florida. We're about $7 billion in assets. We're part of a much larger organization called Popular Inc. That operates the largest bank in Puerto Rico. That's where we were founded in 1893. So we've been around for 122 years. And we also have some operations in the Caribbean. When GlobeOne reached out to me and said, we were involved in this social innovation forum, would you be willing to be a part of it? Obviously, I decided that yes, it didn't take me long to agree to it because this is part of our DNA. Our company has always been very involved in the community, and that's part of who we are. So for me, it's a pleasure to be here, and I think over the past day and a half, I've learned a great deal from all of you. So it's been great being here.
Thanks, Manuel. So what we'd like to do is just play a short video that sets up the rest of the conversation in terms of financial exclusion, how we're looking to address it with the use of technology, and how through community with banks and fintech and corporations, we hope to solve the problem sooner than later. So can we roll the tape, please? So financial exclusion, and as the video stated, there's 2 billion people in the world today that don't have access to formal financial services. And to me, that's kind of shocking, given the type of technology and the type of focus that has been put towards financial exclusion in the last 5 to 10 years. The UN just recently came out and made poverty alleviation the #1 social developmental goal for this generation. The World Economic Forum has a platform specifically to address financial exclusion. Nonprofits like Women's World Banking work with microfinance institutions and banks around the world to address the need of financial empowerment, especially for women, given the fact that a majority of the 2 billion people that are left outside of the formal economy are women. So with all of this focus and all of these resources, it's still difficult for me sometimes to understand why we haven't made more progress, and this has continued to be a persistent issue. And when I speak to people, Manuel, around the country and around the world, the first thing that they come up with is, well, shouldn't the banks take care of that? Isn't that the bank's responsibility to ensure that everybody in the community they serve has access to financial services and is able to get that feeling of empowerment? So it'd be great to just understand your perspective on
Sure.
that.
I want to first start by saying that contrary to popular belief, I know the perception is that banks and bankers are all blood-sucking parasites, but the reality is we really have a vested interest in making sure that we help improve the well-being of the community. Banks benefit from the tide. The tide lifts all boats. So, and there's, I can tell you in our organization, I know many other banks organizations, there's a lot of people very, very actively involved in trying to help the community. But Emil started the session by talking about agape love, selfless love. But the reality is that there's certain economic underpinnings that must support businesses for things to work. And yet, just to level set with the audience, I mean, so you understand a little bit the background of the issue of financial exclusion. Banks rely, the number one source of revenue for banks is interest income. Interest income is nothing else than, obviously, we get deposits, we gather deposits from consumers and businesses. We take those deposits, we pay for those deposits, interest. We turn around and lend those deposits to customers that need loans. And we charge for those loans. The difference between what we charge for the loans and what we pay for the deposits, that's net interest income. That is the number one source of income for banks. That must cover all the expenses that banks have. And banks are very expensive to operate. We have personnel, we have facilities. You can relate if you're operating, in our case, in large cities, big cities like New York, Miami, it's very expensive to have facilities in those cities. Banks have to make enormous investments in technology. That's expensive. So the issue, as a result of that, of banks being so focused on interest income, banks have to pay a lot of attention and try to make sure that they drive that interest income by attracting those customers that bring the most deposits and that have the ability to borrow the most, because that's really what drives the revenue. Unfortunately, a lot of the underserved segments of the population have kind of a perfect storm of unprofitability, in the sense that they tend to live paycheck to paycheck. Balances are low, which translates into lower margins for the banks. They tend to be less tech savvy. So they normally require going to the branches. They rely more on paper transactions. So as a result, servicing those segments is more costly to the banks. And they also require more hand-holding from the bankers. So that demands also more time from your personnel. So the issue is that many banks, as a result, they do, let's do the minimum required to make sure that we comply with our regulatory mandate. Community Reinvestment Act is a regulatory mandate, and banks must comply with it, and let's do enough so publicly, in terms of public opinion, we're responsible social citizens. But the reality is that there hasn't been the impetus or the desire to solve the problem beyond that. I do have one ray of hope and one glimmer of hope, and that is that there's a growing business imperative that didn't exist before, that is a lot more pressing now, and that is those people that are excluded, financially excluded by choice. And the millennial generation is the biggest, segment of that group of individuals. And we all know how important millennials are to businesses. And I think that that's creating an imperative for business to try to figure out how can we bring the millennials into the banking industry, because they really are not that interested in working with us. And I feel that a lot of the solutions that we might be coming up with, for the millennials can be then leveraged to really then bring in the fold those that are excluded by circumstance and not by choice. So from that perspective, I think that, again, the environment is the right environment to address the issue in a more significant way.
No, thanks, Manuel. So, what I took away from that, central to the concern for financial institutions in terms of addressing the needs of the underserved is a business model issue. But it's gotten to the point where if the business model doesn't change, given the apathy of millennials, it's going to be difficult to even bring them into the fold at a later date. And that will impact the future prospects of banks, for decades to come. So it's great to hear that a bank like Popular Community Bank is looking to address this head on and try to take a look at the business model and leverage technology. You've had some good experiences leveraging mobile today. What are some of those learnings in terms of leveraging mobile to serve this type of segment?
One of the things, a good example, one of the things that we did in trying to bring in the underserved market was that we launched our mobile application, and then realized that a lot of people, that there was a flaw in the process. We require the customers to go to the internet, to a computer, and actually pre-register in order for them to download the application, the mobile application. We realized that that was a big flaw because a lot of these people didn't have computers at home. They didn't have high-speed internet. So we actually, working with one of our providers, worked to skip the whole step of going to a computer and pre-registering and go directly and be able to enroll directly onto the mobile application. And that's an example of things that you have to adjust in order to serve this market.
No, that's great insight. And again, globally, as I've traveled the world and we're looking to develop similar partnerships that we've cultivated here with Popular Community Bank in Mexico, Vietnam, Bangladesh, the story's quite similar, even though they're developing markets versus compared to the US. And when you talk to leaders and financial institutions and central bankers there, again, business model is at the crux of the issue. Mexico, 60% of the population does not have access to formal financial services. Same in Colombia, higher in Bangladesh. And when we look at how to solve this problem, because central bankers that we talk to in each of these markets have told us this is a really big issue. And that if we're able to solve financial empowerment and access to financial services, the ability for people to save, to handle different types of hardships, to have access to credit, to send their children to school or pay for bills that are unexpected, really transforms their lives. And one of the additional hurdles that they face in developing markets is the fact that because banks are not ready to serve this set of this population segment, non-banks and others have come in to fill the space, right? So we hear a lot of headlines about mobile money applications, telcos, others coming in into developed as well as developing markets with different types of financial service offerings. And there's a lot of confusion because even when I spoke to people last night here, they thought that financial exclusion wasn't that big of a problem because they see 3 or 4 headlines every day on some company tackling the issue, whether it's in the US with Apple Pay or Samsung Pay, or somebody's tackling it with M-Pesa in Africa and other telcos like GCash in the Philippines. But again, the question comes down to is how do you define financial exclusion and what are the types of services that we're truly after? And for GlobeOne, it's all about working with financial institutions to give people access to a formal bank account that allows them to save money, earn interest on that money, build a credit profile so they can get access to credit. It's not about being able to pay for a transaction at the local convenience store or send money to a friend to split a lunch. It's more basic than that. And I think that's one of the struggles that we've come across is just trying to educate a lot of the other stakeholders who can make a difference in what financial exclusion really is about and the power of having access to a formal bank account. One great example on the power of financial empowerment is we were in Berlin just last week with Women's World Banking. And they shared an interesting study that was done by a nonprofit in Cali, Colombia, Women's Foundation. And what they said was that what they found was as women become more financially empowered, they actually have the confidence to get out of difficult situations and difficult relationships. And this has allowed them to kind of get a new lease on life, go out, work, enjoy a much more fulfilling life going forward because of that empowerment has allowed them to do that. So I guess, Manuel, from your perspective, as you tackle financial exclusion, are there 1 or 2 kind of lessons learned in terms of areas that you've had success?
And I know that our time is up, so we're going to wrap it up. But I want to say that one of the issues that we have and that we think that that's the reason we're partnering up with you guys is that the challenge of scalability. How do you do this? How do you bring more people in a fold in a cost-effective manner that doesn't destroy the business model for the bank? And I think that you guys have done a phenomenal job of coming up with a mobile-based platform that delivers a kind of solution that we think will enable us to reach scalability. So our ability to make an impact in the community grows exponentially because we feel very proud of our history of what we've done up to this point, but the scale is relatively limited, and we have been searching for a way to exponentially increase the impact, and I think that the platform that you guys have built is a platform that will allow us to, again, increase exponentially the impact that we have in the community. So I know our time is up, so with that, I don't know if you have anything else, but yes.
One final comment, sorry, 30 seconds is that, so I just wanted to wrap up by saying GlobeOne, fintech company, looking to build a community, as Mel outlined in his introduction, of financial institutions, corporations, and other strategic partners to help enable greater access to digital financial services. So if you're a financial institution, a corporation, or a strategic entity or a nonprofit that cares about financial empowerment, please come and talk to us. We are only as strong as our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.